My veterinary partner was charging consultations in cash without registering them to keep the money. I found out when a client came to pay for a second consultation for a patient that did not exist in our system. There are frauds that are elaborate, that require parallel accounting and fictitious structures, and a level of planning that in retrospect produces something like disbelief that someone put so much effort into causing harm. And there are frauds that are simple, that require almost nothing. They're sustained by a single condition, that nobody is looking exactly there. Mauricio's fraud was of the simple kind, not because it required little intelligence, but because what it needed to work was basic, a registration system that depended on whoever treated the patient also registering them, and the possibility that whoever treated and registered was the same person could decide not to register. For 18 months, that possibility had been his practice. My name is Elena. I am 38 years old. I am a veterinarian specializing in companion animals, and I have spent 4 years as partner and clinical director of Veterinaria Los Alamos, a mid-sized clinic in Mexico City that Mauricio and I opened together when we both decided to become independent from the clinics where we worked before. Mauricio was 42 years old, also a veterinarian, specializing in soft tissue surgery. We had met at the clinic where we had both worked. The partnership had been both our idea. He brought the surgical specialty I did not have. I brought the client network I had built over years of practice. We both put in the initial capital and both divided profits equally. The administration of the registration system was handled by Mauricio because he had more experience with the software we had chosen. That decision, which at the time had seemed practical, had been the space the problem needed. The client who came in that Tuesday was named Patricia. She had a cat named Luna, but it was not Luna she was bringing that day. It was Milo, a 7-year-old cat that Patricia described as her second cat. She told me Milo had had a consultation with Dr. Mauricio 2 weeks earlier, that the doctor had prescribed a treatment for a respiratory infection, that she was coming to pay for that consultation because she had forgotten on the day she went, and that she also wanted a second consultation to see how Milo was responding to the treatment. I told her I would gladly schedule the second consultation, that to charge for the first, I needed to look up the file. I searched for Milo in the system. He was not there. I searched by the owner's name. Patricia appeared in the system, with Luna, without Milo. I asked her whether it was possible Milo had been registered under another name. She described the cat. I searched by characteristics. Nothing. I told Patricia there was a technical problem with the system, and I was going to resolve it. Then I asked her a few minutes. Patricia sat down to wait. I went to the back of the clinic. I called Mauricio on his cell phone. He answered. I told him I had a client in front of me who was coming to pay for the consultation of a cat named Milo that he had seen 2 weeks ago, and that Milo did not appear in the system. Silence. I asked him whether he remembered the cat. Another silence. He told me it was possible he had forgotten to register it, that he was going to check. I told him the client was waiting and I needed an answer before she left. He told me in an hour he was arriving at the clinic and he would sort out. I hung up. I went back to Patricia. I explained there had been a registration problem and we were resolving it, that she could leave payment for the first consultation and we would send her the receipt as soon as we had the system updated. Patricia was understanding. She left the payment. She left with the second appointment scheduled. In the 45 minutes it took Mauricio to arrive, I did what I had not had reason to do before. I searched the system for all consultation records from the last 6 months. I crossed those records with Mauricio's appointment schedule. Mauricio's schedule was the appointment record he himself managed, separate from the patient file system. What I found was a discrepancy that was not small. There were days when Mauricio's schedule showed 4 or 5 appointments, and the patient file system showed 2 or 3 records from that same day. The discrepancy was not consistent. Not every day, not always the same proportion, but the pattern was there. Enough that when Mauricio arrived, I was waiting for him with that information in hand. Mauricio arrived with the expression of someone who has had 45 minutes to prepare an explanation and who still does not have it completely ready. I sat across from him. I put the comparison of the schedule versus the system on the table. I asked him whether he wanted to explain the discrepancies to me. Mauricio looked at the numbers for a moment. Then he told me there had been clients who preferred to pay in cash, and that sometimes when the workload was high, he had forgotten to register those consultations. I told him what he was describing was an 18-month pattern, that they were not occasional omissions, that it was a consistent practice, that if the cash money from those consultations had not entered the clinic system, it had gone somewhere else. Mauricio did not respond immediately. He looked at me for a moment, and then he told me he was sorry, that he had been going through a difficult economic situation, that he had started doing it once to cover an emergency, that afterward he had continued because it was easy and because there had been no consequences. I called our attorney that same afternoon. Her name was Sophia, and she had spent years in commercial and corporate law. I described what I had found and what Mauricio had admitted. She told me what I was describing was misappropriation of company funds, that the process depended on the magnitude of the diverted amount and what I wanted to happen, that we needed an audit of the discrepancies from the last 18 months to determine the total amount, that in the meantime, it was advisable for Mauricio not to have access to the appointment system or cash payments until the process was clarified. The audit took 2 weeks. What it determined was more than the visible discrepancies had suggested. The conservative estimate of the amount misappropriated over 18 months was 620,000 pesos. Not all in cash. There were also low-cost procedures that Mauricio had charged below the registered fee and kept the difference. 620,000 pesos over 18 months. From a clinic I had built together with him. The dissolution of the partnership was the longest and most painful process of the 4 years of the clinic. Not because there was denial on Mauricio's part when he saw the audit numbers, but because the process of calculating the debt, negotiating the payment, and structuring Mauricio's exit in a way that allowed the clinic to keep operating took time neither of us wanted to be spending together. Mauricio signed a debt payment agreement in installments. He sold his stake in the clinic at a price adjusted by the debt amount. He left. The clinic hired a new veterinarian who specializes in surgery. Mauricio's patients were contacted. Not all of them. Those who had clinical records in the system and whose files showed they had been under follow-up with him. We informed them of the change in the medical team, not the reasons, in a way that allowed them to decide whether to continue with us with a new surgeon or whether they prefer to find another service. Most stayed. What cost me most of this entire process was not the money or the dissolution of the partnership. It was processing what it meant that Mauricio had been in my clinic for 18 months doing that. That every morning we had both arrived and opened the clinic and seen patients, he had been keeping a parallel accounting I could not see. That in the meetings where we reviewed the numbers together, he knew the numbers I was seeing were not the real numbers. That image of the last 18 months reviewed with the information I now had was the hardest part. Not the situation itself. The retroactive review. What I implemented at the clinic after Mauricio left was concrete and documented in the new operating protocol. Separation of functions between whoever treats the patient and whoever processes the payment. Any consultation has to be registered in the system before the patient is seen. The file number has to be on the payment receipt regardless of payment method. Weekly reconciliation between the appointment schedule and the patient file records and income. Any discrepancy of more than 2 records in a week generates an immediate review. Those controls are not complicated. They are basic, and they had not existed because trust in the partnership had occupied the space they should have occupied. What I want you to take from this story has parts for people in very different positions. For those who have a business with partners, the separation of functions between whoever generates the income and whoever registers it, and whoever reconciles, it is the most basic control that exists. Not because partners are dishonest, but because controls protect the relationship in addition to protecting the business. When a single person controls all 3 functions, there is a space that exists regardless of that person's intentions. That space may never be used, and it can also be used the way Mauricio used it. For owners or managers of any service business, periodic reconciliation between registered appointments and registered income is a verification that takes 30 minutes a week and can detect discrepancy patterns before they become 18 months of history. If this story impacted you, comment. Does your business or workplace have a clear separation between whoever generates income and whoever registers it? Or does that function fall to one person? Like if you believe basic financial controls in small businesses are as important as in large companies, even if they feel excessive for the size of the business. Subscribe for more real stories. Share with someone who has their own business or a partnership and who might benefit from reviewing their financial controls before needing them. Practical tip. If you have a service business where payments can be made in cash, implement a simple rule. No service can be rendered without first having a record in the system. The record is the condition for the service to occur and not the result of the service having occurred. That change in sequence eliminates the space where exactly what happened in this story can occur.